Test.
Čujete? Too loud. Sad.
Sada? Valja. Se čuješ šta? Sada? Sada? Još uvijek zuji ili? Bolje?
Jel glasno? A tu ne zuje, tu se čuje normalno, sve samo kod nje na slušalicama je problem. Jel se čuje? Dobre. možeš samo pričati malo, čisto da vidim.
Par ljudi še pričakujemo, no, verjetno zaradi vremena in tako naprej, pridejo malo kasneje. Za začetek bi samo malo zastavil, zakaj se nam je zdelo, da je fajn, da organiziramo nek tak dogodek in pa kako bo sploh potekal. Se pravi, pri Mladih za podnebno pravičnost se nam tudi zdi pomembno, da vključujemo širšo javnost preko dogodkov, kot je to, neke javne deliberacije o ključnih vprašanjih, problemih, s katerimi se soočamo, zato da lahko skupaj zgradimo neke mentalne predstave, miselne okvirje, kako sploh misliti stanje, v katerem smo se znašli, kako misliti možne spremembe, načine sodelovanja. In pa ja, dograjevanja nekih konkretnih predlogov, zahtev, načrtov, grajenje nekega momentuma, ki lahko stvari res spremeni. Zmeraj se moramo spraševati tudi, kdo smo, kaj počnemo, kaj še lahko počnemo, koga naslavljamo, zakaj. In ta vprašanja upam, da bomo lepo uporabno naslovili na današnjem dogodku. Zdaj, z Georgeom smo si nekako zamislili, da bi prve pol ure imeli Q&A, se pravi vprašanja, odgovori. Na začetku bi Georgeom malo poskušal predstaviti lokalni kontekst, se pravi, kako je gibanje pri nas, v bistvu, kako je prišlo do tega, kaj se vse dogaja. Bom probal zelo na kratko, če me bo kdo hotel dopolniti s čim pomembnim, naj me le. Potem bomo imeli Q&A in v zadnjem delu, približno polovico, bomo igrali eno igro. Se pravi, skupaj s Georgeom in v sodelovanju med vsemi bomo zgradili zgodbe prihodnosti, ki jih želimo. Mogoče se sliši malo naivno, ampak počakajmo, pa dajmo šanso. Tako da zdaj bi kar počasi poklical Georgea, pa kar začnemo. Hi, George. Just 1 second. Turning on our video. Video. Can you see us, George? Okay, well, we'll get this sorted. If I could ask... Yeah, that's quite possible. Yeah, we have quite the technical setup here, you know. Is it very bothersome? Okay. We'll just try to up the volume a little bit here. The camera should be working. I think you can see us now, right? Hey. So let's set this up so you can see as many of us. We're still expecting some people to show up during, but we thought let's just start. So how we envisioned this is that first I would try to, on behalf of the movement, explain a bit of the local context of how the movement came to be, what's it doing, what's the kind of local political landscape and what's going on. I'll try to be as brief as possible, and then we'll go on to some Q&A. So we have some questions prepared. We also got some questions from the wider public through our social media. Have about 5-6 questions, maybe some sub-questions or questions that the audience would like to pose as well, present here. And then we'd like to move on to a sort of experimental participatory game of creating storylines about possible futures. So at that point I will explain a little bit of the instructions, and I'll send you the template through which you can participate as well. Okay, excellent. So in brief, so our name at the moment is Youth for Climate Justice. So it's a kind of initiative that's been around for a few years, but it really gained new life and momentum when a couple of very engaged young people kind of self-organized and said, hey, there's, you know, this big mobilization going on, the kind of Greta moment, and yeah, we said, I mean, there's an acute lack of some kind of, you know, active ecological citizenship around these issues in Slovenia. So we thought this is a very important window of opportunity to kind of establish a base here that can be a connecting line between different organizations, people, and so on. And we kind of went about it sort of fairly systemically, in that we also formulated concrete demands from government, especially relating to energy transition, food, of course always with this important social justice dimension of sustainability and climate transition. And so we also kind of organized in a very organic, non-hierarchical, distributed way. There's groups and subgroups which are constantly kind of remolding, reshaping, hybridizing, or disappearing and reappearing, focusing on things like public education events such as this, to interventions in public space, to a little bit of thinking about the PR of the whole movement and building a narrative, and especially maybe creating alliances. In the last months or so especially, we've made a big push in aligning ourselves with non-governmental organizations, with unions, with civil society organizations, retirees, and so on. And it's really like the next step of the movement, of us stepping together, youth kind of starting and spearheading this on the backbone of the concrete science that's telling us radical change is needed. But of course, this is within a very specific local, national context of a state system that's very administrative and rationalized in some sense. And there's, lots of work to be done, lots of new capacities to be developed to be able to really facilitate this transition. And we think it's important to address those at power to facilitate this thing. So for our first question, we thought to ask, how come you answered our email, George? Well, I'm kidding a bit, but with this I wanted to give you a little bit of a chance to say what you think, what you feel about these movements that are sparking up, and what you think your role is in this mutual solidarity.
Well, I've been waiting for this moment, I guess, throughout my whole adult life. That it's been really a very frustrating career, because I have spent my whole life warning about where we're heading to, and finding not only very little interest from governments in that, but also not much interest from people in general. And I was almost beginning to believe that we're not going to mobilize people on a sufficient scale, because people are too wrapped up in their own lives and their own jobs and their self-interest and the rest of it. And I wasn't exactly despairing, but I was gradually losing hope. Day by day, it all seemed less and less likely that we could pull ourselves out of the death spiral that we were in. And then suddenly things began to happen. Greta happened, and when she caught the world's imagination, young people around the world who suddenly thought, wow, we actually are powerful. We can do things which capture political attention, and we can change the whole conversation. Extinction Rebellion happened in my country in a big way, and there they had worked for a long time to try to determine what makes a protest successful, and develop what they call a protest algorithm, really just learning the lessons from movements through history to see why some have been successful and some have not been, and then applying those lessons with tremendous effect. And some issues which were completely marginalised, that were really beyond the scope of anything that the media covered, not really interesting politicians, not interesting to the majority of people, have gone mainstream. And this is a very exciting moment, a thrilling moment. And throughout my career, I felt that I know what to say and I know what to write, but I haven't known what to do. I've been involved in many protest groups, and some have had small victories, local victories. We've had some successes, but none of them have amounted to anything like the scale required to take on these huge predicaments that threaten us and the rest of the living world in unprecedented ways. And now I think we're achieving that scale. So I'm tremendously excited by the new movements, particularly the youth movements. I'm delighted to be in a position where I can sort of step back a bit and be a follower rather than trying to be a leader. I never made a very good leader at the best of times, but to be able to say, okay, this is now, it's the young people now who are leading this. It's up to adults, to older people like myself, to step forward and stand in solidarity with the young people, but for the young people to say, this is where we're going with it, this is what we want, this is what we're doing. And I'm very happy to follow that, because I see for the first time in my life this huge and highly effective movement has developed, and I'm just delighted to be part of it. I mean, I'm very glad I have lived long enough to see this moment happen.
I think a lot of us and people in the audience share that feeling a lot. On to our second question, which is kind of a question of reflection of who we are and where we're going. So how do you think it's significant that youth in particularly are spearheading these protests? So we have, this very appeal to moral and appeal to those who will be the creators of futures tomorrow and so on. So what's your take and what's the strategic and significance of youth leading this?
Well, I think it is essential that it is the youth who are the leaders now. One reason is that young people have greater moral authority, I think, than older people. Because you are able to say, well, this is the world which we are going to inherit. We could be in this world for another 90 years, or possibly even more. And we're going to see things in our lifetime that no one should have to see unless we take drastic action right now. And older people who have tended to govern most societies don't have that long-term interest for very obvious reasons, and seem quite prepared to pursue their short-term interests at the expense of subsequent generations. That's how it's been for a long time. Unfortunately, with many of our politicians, that still seems to be the prevailing doctrine. So younger people have got the moral authority of being able to say, this is going to be our planet, and by the time we're your age, you're not going to be around anymore. So actually, our voices should count more than yours. That's one thing. But there's a sense that as people become older, they become more corrupt. They become corrupted by the world in one way or another. Sometimes directly, sometimes people get bought off and become part of the corporations that are killing the planet, or take money from them, or just find that they make more and more compromises as they go along. You might start with high ideals, and then you think, oh, I've got to pay the mortgage, I've got children now to look after, I can't spend my time doing this, I've got to make some money. And younger people on the whole have to make fewer of those compromises and are purer in the way that they can approach an issue. And that's another reason why we should be listening more, I believe, to young people than to older people. Because their motives aren't, on the whole, I mean, I know I'm generalizing here, but on the whole aren't modelled up with other motivations.
And well, on the other side of this coin, we're seeing a lot of those in power kind of employing various tactics to either delegitimize the youth climate justice movement, or saying, hey kids, you're better off staying in school, or they say, oh, these crazy vegans, why don't they get a job already, or saying we're some kind of shills of a leftist plot to overthrow something, or some even would mistake us for an NGO because, well, we are kind of working as an activist-oriented, distributed NGO of sorts, and we do PR in a way. We create, try to construct a narrative in these connections. So yeah, from all fronts. I mean, it's not the majority. Also here in Slovenia, I wouldn't say, but there's a lot of these kind of appeals going around. What do you think is going on in their heads, George?
Well, I mean, I would just take this as a compliment. They are scared. They are frightened that their corrupt world is potentially coming to an end, that they can't continue on this trajectory, which is basically stealing from the future in order to enrich them in the present. And they know that their wealth and power depends upon the existing corrupt system, and that you are threatening that system. Now, it's not very nice to have all these stories told about you and to be the subject of conspiracy theories and stuff, but the only thing worse than being talked about, if you are a protester, is not being talked about. It's when they ignore you that you really need to get worried, because then you know you're not having a big enough impact. It is when they get really angry and reactive and start saying these stupid things and telling these ridiculous stories about you and trying to disqualify you and delegitimize you, then you know you're having an impact. And so don't listen to what they're saying, because what they're saying is just nonsense, not worth listening to. But listen to the fact that they're saying, the fact that there are editorials in the billionaire press saying these people are terrible and they're ridiculous and stupid. I mean, just that they're very angry editorials, and that there are lots of angry people on the television denouncing you. This is a very good thing. This means that you're getting through. This means that they are being forced to listen to us and what we're saying. Because let me tell you, throughout most of my working life, they haven't been listening at all. We've just been completely ignored. And there have been times when I was just wishing that someone would attack me, because then it would at least mean that they were listening, that they had heard what was being done. But there's a sense that you can raise your voice as much as possible, but no one was hearing. Well, the highest compliment they can pay you is to attack you in this completely vicious and irrational way, because that shows how scared they are.
Excellent. We're kind of talking to power here, right? As a movement, we are kind of stating that no, it is governments who kind of should be accountable and hold the responsibility to facilitate, through regulatory frameworks, through different distributions of wealth and tax and so on. And within governments, there's also people we have to be solidary with. They are fighting the good fight. But there's also, people who do not do that, like what we discussed before. So in the Slovenian context, we put some demands forward, but we don't feel like we are really being listened to by government officials. So a lot of it is, the kind of standard, youths, young people, we support you, and we're doing all this stuff already, kind of look at this EU project, look at that EU project, and so on. Also, on our initiative, the government established a working group for restructuring coal regions. We're kind of demanding the just transition or shutdown of the coal plant. This is an example, right? So there's a representative of our movement within this working group, but yeah, there's big limitations. They do not want to, set concrete dates on when things should close and so on. There's heavy, kind of, the process is laden with interests of, and at the same time, this working group doesn't really have that much influence or power on the whole policy making or political process. So we thought of maybe turning to you to tell us from your point of view, like why is it really significant that we are addressing state institutions, or maybe even municipal institutions these days can do a lot of things, but how do you envision that there's roles and functions can be kind of extended, new capacities built of the state to kind of facilitate the shift? And we're talking one step beyond like a nominative declaration of a climate emergency or something like that, but concrete steps of maybe, more solidarity and cooperation and inclusion in these processes of transition.
Well, one of the encouragements I've drawn from Greta's example, which is a very powerful example, is to say to myself, we're not negotiating with these people, because actually there's no negotiation to be done. We can't meet them halfway between what the science says we need to do and what they want to do, which is basically nothing. There's no halfway point which is scientifically realistic. Yeah, and we keep being told by politicians, oh well, that's not realistic. That's not politically realistic to want total decarbonisation by 2030, for example. And you say, well, you say it's not politically realistic, but it's not scientifically realistic to say what you're doing. And political realism is something that can change. Politics is infinitely flexible. You can sort of what seems impossible today suddenly becomes possible tomorrow. All sorts of crazy things happen in politics that no one predicted. Look at the UK right now. It's just gone completely berserk. No one could possibly have imagined this could happen in our politics. So political realism isn't a fixed thing. It's not really even a thing. But scientific realism is definitely a thing. You can't argue with the laws of physics. You can't say, oh, well, we'll just park the first law of thermodynamics for a few years, all right? And pay no attention to it. You can't. It's just, these are physical realities. They are non-negotiable. So we don't negotiate. We say, as Greta says, this is why I think she's such a brilliant communicator, and she's got it completely right. She says, don't listen to me, listen to the science. This is what the science says. This is where we need to be. And I think you are going to be in this place, actually following through on what the science does, keeping fossil fuels in the ground, backing that up with massive natural climate solutions, drawing carbon dioxide out of the air. Either we're going to do that on the required scale, or you're not with this program at all, and you're going to be part of the problem. So you choose that, but then we're halfway out. We're not going to meet you halfway and say, okay, well, we'll do a little bit of decarbonisation, and we'll only have 4 degrees of global heating, not 6. That's not a compromise which any of us are able to make. We have no moral authority in making that compromise, because it's not just our lives we're talking about, it's other people's lives as well, and it's the rest of the living world. So we can't say that. We can't say, okay, we'll accept that, because we can't accept it. And so, from my point of view, what I'm seeing now is right. Our role is to elect governments, or support governments or political parties that actually are doing what the science says we have to do, and to oppose everyone who's not doing that, and to say, you can come and want to barter things. You can be like, we're not bartering. We're just saying this is what you need to do. Either you do it and we support you, or you don't do it and we campaign against you. It's as simple as that. Now, obviously, there is structural change within government which is also required. And governments are set up often in such a way that, or politics is set up in such a way that it's almost impossible to get what we want. For instance, I don't know about Slovenia, I'm afraid I don't know anything about Slovenian politics, but in the UK, we've got this terrible campaign financing arrangement, whereby we've got a cap on the total amount that any political party can raise in terms of money, but there's no cap on the amount that any one person can give to that party. So you have a situation where one or two people will provide the majority of the funding for a political party. And so who does that party listen to? Does it listen to the people as a whole, or does it listen to those one or two? I think we can guess out. We know that you have to dance with the one who brings you. And they bring you to the ball, you don't dance with that person. So there are structural things that need to change. That is part, I believe, of the no-compromise position. You have to change these things because they are impediments to getting to the scientific position, the scientific politics, if you like, that we need to reach. The politics that reflects what the science says. And, suddenly, it's at that moment of clarity and of delight where I thought, wait a minute, we just don't have to do this anymore. We don't have to go and sit there and say, okay, we'll give a little bit, you take a little bit, we'll take, you give. We don't have to do that. We just say, this is it. Here are the things which need to happen. They need to happen. We all know, unless you deny the science, you know this needs to happen. So you do it or you don't. That's all we've got to say to you. And it's Greta Thunberg who's really articulated that so clearly, and she's sort of opened the political space to be able to take that position. I'm very grateful to her for that.
Well, at this point, maybe just an interlude question.
Your volume's gone.
Apologies.
Oh, it's come back.
Yeah, I just turned it off so you wouldn't hear the buzz of what you was
Because it was, it's not a very nice noise.
Yeah, I can imagine. I thought maybe an interlude question from our public call for questions, because it relates a bit to the British context, and we were just discussing a little bit of the context in Britain. The question is by Mateusz, and he asks, which steps towards carbon neutrality does the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs intend to implement in the coming decade, if you're familiar?
Thank you. Well, so our environment department here is only halfway where it needs to be. There are definitely some improvements. It's got an environment bill, a new bill going through Parliament, or possibly going through Parliament, if Parliament is still a functional entity in this country, which heads roughly in the right direction. We've declared a climate emergency, and the government says it wants to decarbonise by 2050. But, none of this is sufficient. Nowhere near. We also have, we're meant to have an agriculture bill, which would be pretty positive, in that it would stop after Brexit, we would no longer have a system like the common agricultural policy, which is one of the biggest causes of environmental destruction in Europe. I'm pro-European, but I'm totally against the European common agricultural policy, which basically pays people to destroy wildlife. That's what it does, because it says we will only pay for land that is in agricultural condition. We don't actually have to grow any food there, but it has to look as if food is being grown, can be grown there. And what that means in practice is the land has to be bare. And if there are any wildlife habitats on that land, you will not receive any money for those habitats. So you want to clear them in order to receive money on that land. And the result of that is that hundreds of thousands of hectares of amazing, beautiful ecosystems have been destroyed across Europe just because of that stupid policy. So our new agriculture bill is actually very positive, because it says we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to pay people to do good things. But because of all the crazy stuff happening in Parliament, that bill might now not happen. So what I'd say is that there's definitely been improvement, but in line with what I was saying before, improvement is not enough. standards that the government has to reach, and it has not reached them. So, we're not going to go around saying, what you're doing is great, or what you're doing is halfway there, because actually, halfway there isn't anywhere. We're just going to say, what you're doing is inadequate. Here's what you need to do. And we're not going to give you any support until you do that. And we actually, from the Labour Party now, our opposition party, we're seeing something a lot better developing, which is maybe even in line with what the science says. Just yesterday, at the Labour Party conference, there was a declaration that a Labour government would make this country net zero carbon by 2030, which is pretty well in line with what the science says. It's very close to it. So I think we can pretty well say, if they do that, they're there. They now need to do similar things with the ecology of this country, which is in a terrible state. We need to see massive rewilding, all sorts of changes happen where they're not there at all yet. But I'm going to talk to them tomorrow, so who knows, things might change.
Well, best of luck. Sorry, I said best of luck.
Thank you.
Or maybe we can get to the second question from the public call for questions, and then a last question pertaining to your concept of public luxury, private sufficiency. So the question from the audience, from the call, is pertaining to alliances and conflicts relating to companies and industrialists. So are companies and industrialists necessarily against bold climate action, he asks, because they're typically in favor of policies promoting more economic growth, lower taxes, loose environmental policies, but at the same time there's this great moral imperative of relevant climate action, and it's demanding such deep structural change in the economy comparable only to revolution. So this means industrials will typically oppose climate action, but the question is opposition from our side to industry necessary, or is industry's opposition to climate action really necessary? Is there a conflict to be won, or are there any other ways forward here?
I think, and thank you for another very good question. I think we can't expect industry ever to be part of the solution until we have the structural economic change within which the industry might then be able to function. And so part of that change would be to say we are no longer going to prioritise economic growth. Since when was gross domestic product a sensible way of measuring human welfare, let alone the welfare of the rest of the living world? Well, plainly it's not. We need other indicators to show whether our lives are improving or not. Because at the moment, by pursuing growth, it might look like progress, but it's progress towards the edge of the cliff. It's progress towards disaster. And while we've got a system which encourages and rewards companies to when they expand and produce more and as a result make more profit, then even a company with the best people in charge is going to be part of the problem. Because economic growth is the aggregate of all the attempts to secure further profit and economic gains. By not just corporations, but by billionaires and other people who are extracting rent from society, and we have to put the economy onto a new footing. And what's exciting is that, again, that might sound politically impossible. And just a couple of years ago, I had so many people saying that's not politically realistic. But now we see even some governments beginning to talk about it. You see in New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern's government actually saying GDP is a stupid way to measure human welfare. Let's have a way of doing it. And you think, whoa, this is very exciting. There's a big shift just beginning to happen. And of course there's blowback against it. There are attempts to do the opposite. Donald Trump is doing in the US at the moment. But these are the dying spasms of the old 1990s. system, or I hope they are, and that you couldn't be, if enough of us get behind us on the cusp of the transition towards something very different indeed. There's so much new thinking in economics taking place at the moment, and there are massive battles taking place in university economics departments as the students and the young postgraduates challenge the old professors and say, you've been teaching us nonsense all this time. We need to start looking at an entirely different system. Well, and then you create this different system and you say, okay, now, can corporations be part of the answer? Well, we'll see, but only if they fulfill this criteria, this, and this. So if there are going to be corporations, they're going to look very different to the corporations that prevail today. So that's almost a sort of second order issue by comparison to the structural economic change with which we need to deal. All these are huge issues, but the number of people who are suddenly switching on to them is just quite astonishing. I mean, things, again, which were completely marginal only a few months ago, which only nutcases were talking about, or so we were called. Now, suddenly, you've got the governor of the Bank of England going, maybe they've got a point. And you think, okay, things are shifting very fast. And just as you never really know what's going to happen in politics, I would suggest we never really know what's going to happen in economics either.
Which brings us to kind of the last question.
Musically.
Sorry again. Which kind of brings us to the last question, which is, you had a TED Talk recently talking about like the neoliberal story and how it can also make change by telling new stories that can leave actors, organizations, our goals in kind of different ways, and that exerting some influence and pressure on change. And we were kind of wondering if you could explain to us some of the key concepts or frameworks that you use in your kind of thinking about what are these transformative stories, and what are these worlds that could be, that we need to articulate as a way to build pressure, to build kind of normative basis on which to assess present action, criticize it.
Because there are lots of places that answer could go, but would you mind if I talked about just one aspect of it, which is the price efficiency?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Because it's a huge
of course.
area, and we could take several hours otherwise. But so one of my perspectives is this: that the economy is currently set up to encourage all of us to pursue private luxury. And what we're told is that we'll all just become richer and richer and richer. Economic growth will enable that. Well, we already know that we've hit some of the crucial planetary boundaries. In fact, we've gone beyond some of those planetary boundaries already. And that's with current levels of economic activity. Then you want to double it, you want to double it again. The ecological space does not exist. And it doesn't. And the only reason that some people can live in such luxury is that other people don't. If everybody sought to live like millionaires with enormous houses and their own swimming pools and their own tennis courts and their own art collections, there wouldn't even be physical space for it. We would need several planets. Ljubljana would be the size of London if everybody lived like that. London would be the size of England. England would be the size of the world. There physically would not be enough room for everyone to live. And then, in ecological terms, even more. A few hundred billionaires do as much damage as over half the world's population. That's now well established. The extraordinary ecological footprints of these people with their massive yachts and their multiple homes and their supercars and their private planes, you can't possibly sustain them. And yet the promise of our current economic system is that everybody will have it. We'll all get richer and richer. The rich people can live like the oligarchs, the poor people can live like the rich people. everybody can aspire to be a millionaire, and that's the promise. And it's a false promise. It can't possibly be met. But there is another thing for everyone to have public luxury. And by creating public luxury, you don't take space away from other people, you give space to people. So if you create fantastic national parks, and wonderful playgrounds for children, and great public swimming pools, and public tennis courts, and art galleries and museums, you actually create more space for people than they previously had, without having to use a huge portion of the planet for destructive activities. In fact, if you create great national parks, then you're doing the opposite. You're creating space for people and for nature at the same time. And so, we need private sufficiency as well. We all need a good home, for example, a decent home over our heads so that we have a reasonable quality of life which isn't going to leave the planet. But we should be pursuing luxury, not in our own homes, and not in, let alone multiple homes or anything. We pursue luxury in the public domain. And to me, it's a simple principle, private sufficiency, public luxury, but it opens the door to all sorts of interesting new ways of looking at what economic life would be like and of our relationship with each other and with the living world.
Excellent, thank you. I think this is a really great segue into this next bit that I talked about. So the idea is to kind of quickly play a game where the theme is public luxury. So the name of the game is A Day in the Life, Public Luxury in 2035. So the idea is we have three kind of segments that each of us will try to fill, but we'll fill them in a way where, so the first question is related to an everyday life experience or activity in the year 2035 connected to a certain public service or public luxury. So for inspiration, we have some words that can help us think in these directions. So what I'd like for us to all do is each of us will fill out this first part, and then we'll look to our colleagues on the right and the left, behind, and in front of us to fill out the second and third part of the story to create a sort of compound whole. And we would invite, you can give this first line of story to fill to anyone randomly, or you have a particular person in mind that you want to give it. And also I'd invite everyone to give George some of these to fill out. And I'd also invite George to write one or two lists with the first sentence, so the starting sentence that others can then fill. I will send you the instructions and the question shortly. I will just repeat the instructions in Slovenian one time for people here to know, and then I'll send it to you, okay? Torej, mislim, da ste zdaj vsi dobili tale listek. Če nimate bolje, da je vam. Se pravi, ideja je, da izpolnite vsak s pomočjo teh promptov, ki so pod prvo temo, da opišete eno vsakdanje življenjsko izkušnjo s neko javno storitev. Lahko je to hodil si v parku in je ogromno javnih umetnikov v javnem prostoru, tako se lahko manj počutite zaradi tega. Lahko je pridobivam hrano in zelo zanimivo trajnost in skupnostne način, tako. In potem vas vabim, da date naprej list nekomu, lahko nekomu, ki se vam zdi posebej primeren za to. In pa seveda drugi del in potem date še naprej za izpolnitev tretjega dela. Lahko tudi, če se vam zdi, nekatere posredujemo Georgeu, jaz bom prepisal to tukaj na Skype pogovoru in bo on dodelal naprej to zgodbo in pa sam bo začel kakšno zgodbo ali dve in bom dal vam, da nekdo izpolni. So for this, we will have about 15 minutes to write a couple of these stories. I'll be going around and collect some of the finished stories, and for the last 5 minutes of our talk, we'll try to highlight some of these stories and their implications for our activist work.
So you send this...
Yeah, I'll send them right away.
Če kdo nima kulja, pa ga
Lahko v kateremkoli jeziku, če boste dali Georgeu, bom jaz prevedel. Slovenščini ali angleščini. Nemščini tudi še gre. Sorry, just a second. I will try to copy-paste what I have here instead of type it all down. I'm not familiar with this computer. Okay, those are the instructions for the first part. If there's any unclarities, let me know. So the question is a sort of theme. Yeah. You can just brainstorm and type down 2 or 3 sentences describing a situation. Ja, po želji. Ja, tako je. Enemu in pol še tisti dan naprej za še tretjo, ne? Če pa želite, pa lahko kdo prinese sem, če ste izpolnili prvo, ali ste že je nekdo izpolnil drugo, od nekoga prve. Lahko damo Georgeu.
Vsak eno izpolni, potem da.
Ja.
Eno smo še naredili, pol prihodnostih.
svojo vsakdanje življenjsko izkušnjo aktivno skriti? Kaj je to, da si kaj je? Prosto moraš povedati, recimo, da si misliš, da si leta 2035 in v tej svetli prihodnosti ti upišeš, kaj je bilo tvoje, kaj si delal tisti dan, kaj je bilo drugače, kako je zdaj. Da je bilo pač tako narejeno. Pa če sem napisal, da sem šel jezditi zdrav veganski obrok lokalnega izvora, zelensko cima, kjer kupujem prostovoljci v obratu, ki je v javni lasti in sem jih hierarhično samo upravljal. Kam? Čeprav to ne vem, glih luks. Sam to prvo. Pa to drugo en drug, mislim, da... A to se moramo izmeniti?
Ja, zamenjamo.
Dobro.
Žnoga.
Ja, sem... Enega, sem ta prvi. Ja, sam vi ste pa že napisali.
Ja, zdaj moramo biti slišati.
Še kakšno vprašanje?
Pa to skupaj.
Če bi kdo Georgeu predal kakšno zgodbico, da je dokonča, lahko samo prosite, da je mogoče listek, ki je posebno dobro čutljiv. Excellent. So I will write this one on one of the pieces of paper we have here and hand it up to people. And I'll get one or two from the audience that you can fill out. So the next parts of the story. So we're filling them out. We're filling it like this. In 5 minutes, we'll get them all together and discuss. Aha, pa po želji se lahko tudi podpišete pod svojim delom zgodbice, tako da vemo, od koga je kaj, po želji. So, imamo kakšnega za Georgea? Kaj je? Mislim, ta je do konca izpolnjen.
Ja, tretja, te pa tretji prispevek. So ustvarjeni.
Sam težko bi to...
It seems little when it's typed down, but I'm writing here. It's quite a long one. Maybe I'll invite someone to just come up and read it from here and continue on.
Ne bo to za George.
Kdo bi želel nadaljevati zgodbo Georgea? Naj digne roko. Kdorkoli. Je že napisal svoj del zgodbe, tukaj pridete, ga preberete in izpolnite drugi del. Ok, aja. So we have the first person to complete the second part of your story. Tukaj imaš prvi del, boš ti dopisala drugi del. Potem pa še nekdo lahko pride, da zapolni tretji del. Lahko? Samo da končam. Imamo kakšno zgodbico, ki jo lahko George tu konča? Ne, nobeno? Fajn bi bilo ga vključiti.
Zihar je kakšna nedobna je dokončana, pa neste sem.
Imaš pa bližno v mislih tole? Bi lahko polje sem tukaj dopisal tole.
Vse tukaj piše. Večina lahko je to.
So we got one story that you can finish the third part of. Everyday. And the second part is the systemic change, to make it possible. And your role now is to write what this means. You feel like. Okay. smo dopisali večino. Se mi zdi, da verjetno nam imeli veliko časa, da bi pregledovali vse in jih debatirali preveč, ampak bi pa res povabil vsakega od vas, če se vam zdi kakšna zgodbica še posebej zanimiva, ki jo imate v roki, bi dal mikrofon na okol, pa bi podelili te zgodbe. Dal bom minutko, pa mogoče lahko dvigne roko, kdo bi bil pripravljen povedati zgodbo, ki jo ima pred sabo.
Moja je zelo zanimiva. Dodala sem samo konec.
Lahko tudi meni rečete, če je recimo v slovenščini, pa niste
Staj v slovenščini.
Če niste toliko, ne vem, v svoje skillse, kakorkoli lahko od oka prevede.
Na zanimivo področje posega.
No, tukaj imamo kandidata. Še kakšna zgodbica? 1, 2, 3 bi bilo fajn deliti, kaj se vam zdi. Kakšna vredna deliti?
Vse.
Vse? Super.
Sami presute.
Ne, mladost tako, ko nima kam s tem.
Se to dobro. Za optimizem.
A ja, ne, mislim, zadnjo bi nekdo drug izpolnil. Prosti. Bi prišla tretjo izpolniti? Zdaj, kolegica je v bistvu tudi tukaj napisala, ampak lahko tudi prečrtaš, pa napišeš svoje.
Ne tipkam.
Se pravi, prvi del, se bom tukaj dal, kaj ga je napisal, nisem čist celega prepisal. Če rabaš pomoč, mi povej pri razumevanju. Tole je poslala za prvo, te kolegica napisala za drugo.
Ne tipkam pa zdaj.
Ne, samo tukaj napišem, bom že jaz povedal. Okay, excellent. So, George, I will read out just 2 or 3 stories that we generated, including your story and how we completed it. Do you have 5 minutes more for this? Is it okay? Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we have everything here in front of us. So let's first start with yours, shall we? So George started the story by saying, so the everyday life experience. When work ends, I use the monorail to take me back to the bicycle park, where I pick up my bike and cycle to the community orchard I helped to plant, where a group of us are pressing apples to make juice, cider and vinegar. Quite like my life at the moment, in other words, but with added monorail. Excellent. So our colleague here continues. Every day I wake up to a breeze of fresh air. Oh, how thankful is my heart that the kids were never silent, that the participation was radical and change inevitable. We build a community within decision-making, solidarity, ownership. Oh, how sweet a fresh apple pie from the something of our orchard. And the third one, the feeling of it. if I remember what state this was in 2019, this makes me feel so much more alive. So that's yours, and we'll maybe read out one or two stories from here, and that's it. I'm just finding one that's very easy to read. Okay, so first one. Over the weekend, I go to a psychotherapy workshop, which is free and publicly accessible to all people, as the then society puts mental and physical health at a very high place. The second, the systemic change. Health as an indicator of the success of society and public interest into public financing of such projects. And number three, how this makes me feel. It makes me feel great. This moment, on this
Planet on holiday.
we are on permanent holiday, or something like this. Yeah, it feels like permanent holiday. And the last one. Let's see, I can't read the first part. Okay, I've got one. So the first one, fast rail. A higher percentage of passengers on trains and on city buses. Less passengers on big jets. An electrification of bicycles. Energetically efficient houses. And healthy foods in restaurants. The second, the systemic change. So what happens is green policies, democratic decision-making processes, individual yet collective property, global redistribution of wealth, which were directed into art and well-being of all. And if I remember what state was this in 2019, that makes me feel frustrated. Okay, so those are two examples, and our idea is also to use some of this input for a newspaper from the future that we're kind of, some of us have been talking about starting up. So it will be a publication sometime in the near future, and we'd like to use this input as well, with your permission, with your creative endeavor as well. Okay, thank you so much. And I think this...
It's been a pleasure to talk to you all. Thank you very much. And I wish you all strength and solidarity in fighting for the world, our mother, on which we depend completely. So that's all that is happening.
Thank you. Okay, s tem smo zaključili to aktivnost. Bi vas pa še pozival, da ostanete na okol, kajti veliko je priprav še za protest v petek in potrebujemo prav vsake roke, ki jih dobimo, prav vsako delujoče supermožgane, ki imamo tukaj, za razne govore, za razne aktivnosti, za protest. Tako da bi povabil, da se zminglamo, tamna je naša operativna ekipa, deluje že cel dogodek na raznih stvareh. Samo se pogovarjamo, poprašamo, kaj je še mogoče za storiti, kakšne super ideje, kaj bi še lahko naredili, da bi ta protest bil toliko bolj udaren. Hvala za vašo pozornost oziroma to celo interaktivnost, ki smo probali nekako eksperimentalno upeljati. Verjetno bomo poskušali v prihodnosti tudi malo bolj, malo bolj izpiljene, tudi seveda je proces učenja. Tako da, hvala vam in prosim, če se le da, ostanite in še kaj podebatiramo. Hvala.
Hvala tebi, Hvala.